Hello, everybody. My name is Lisa Lamont, and I am your host of Ladies Get Your Prance On. And I am here today with a very, very special guest. I reached out to her last month because I've read her book. I've heard her story, and it absolutely inspired me because I want women to know that no matter what has happened in our past, no matter what has happened in our life, that we don't have to be ashamed of our experiences. And so many women have had horrible things that have happened to them throughout life. And so for years, we've kept our story in shame or guilt or frustration. And so today's guest is Rhonda Stapley, and she wrote this book, I Survived Ted Bundy, The Attack, Escape, and PTSD That Changed My Life. And the person who wrote the foreword, I want to read a little bit about it as I introduce Rhonda here in just a moment. But the person who wrote the foreword is the late Anne Rule, and she has been such an inspirational writer. I met her 6 years ago and her daughter Leslie at the Northwest Women's Show in Seattle. And I had just that day launched a women's group called Prancing Kittens, which is the name that you see, Prancing Kittens. And I wanted to have a group for women to come together that were safe, that we could support one another both in business and personally, that didn't have political or religious overtones, because those two topics tend to divide women. And Anne Rule was there, and she asked for a Prancing Kitten t-shirt, and I was like, I'm so excited. And so I want to just read a little bit of the foreword that she wrote. So she recently was on Dr. Phil a year ago too. I forgot to express that too, so we'll talk about that. And Anne Rule wrote this: why did it take so long for Rhonda to come forward? Her choice to keep the assault a secret was not unusual. Rape victims who summoned the courage to report the attacks and testify against their assailants are in the minority. While it's impossible to gauge the exact percentage of women who report rapes, some law enforcement authorities estimate that less than 1 in 10 come forward. It is not just the fear of retaliation that keeps victims from talking. Humiliation and guilt are powerful deterrents. Despite the fact that we are more than a decade into the 21st century, our culture has not yet shaken the blame the victim mentality that has prevailed for so long. Victims tend to blame themselves for being so stupid, for putting themselves in danger, when in fact every single one of us has let down our guard at one time or another, and we're simply lucky that we weren't victimized. And so I would like to welcome with an open heart Rhonda Stapley. Welcome, Rhonda.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
So how long was it that when you were on the Dr. Phil show talking about your book and your experience?
Dr. Phil's crew was all very professional and very nice. They kept me busy and just hopping around from thing to thing, so I didn't have time to be very worried until it was about 20 minutes before the show started, and then they took us to the green room. The green room is called green room because that's where you start feeling sick and nauseous. And so then there I was starting to get worried. And then when it was my turn to go out, my daughter went with me as my support person, and she gave me a hug and she says, "You're going to do all right, Mom. Just really concentrate on not throwing up on Dr. Phil's shoes."
So how long were you actually there recording the show? That was one of the questions that somebody asked me about. How long were you actually there recording?
Probably 2.5 hours. It was really long, and then they edited it out and put in the parts that they wanted and take out the things that we said that sounded stupid.
Yeah. No, that doesn't happen. So the first question I want to ask you is, why did you decide to write the book now?
I never actually decided to write a book. Writing the book was, this had been a secret for 40 years, and I planned to keep it a secret for my entire life. What happened is I was in the midst of post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms of having nightmares and flashbacks, and I was trying to do research, trying to figure out what's going on with me and what can I do to fix this. And everything that I read and everybody that I had talked to said the only way, or the main way, to fix the PTSD symptoms was to talk about what happened, to take those feelings and emotions out and look at them and organize them into sentences and paragraphs and and out what has happened. And I thought that maybe I could talk about them on paper and just write it down, like writing a journal.
So how did that start? What did you just get out a notebook? Did you start typing? And where do you start when you write something like this?
Well, I just started at the beginning. I kind of pretended I was sitting on the deck talking to a friend, and I just says, let me tell you what happened to me on this day, and then I'd write that, and I'd write 4 or 5 pages, and then I would stop and I'd read it back to myself. And when I read it back, I think, I dare tell a little bit more about that. So I'll write a little bit more. And by the time I was finished, I found that every time I read through it, I felt a little bit better.
So what year did you start actually writing? What year was it? When did this occur? What year did this occur? And because some people may not know who Ted Bundy is. So if you could maybe backtrack for that.
Okay, this was in October of 1974. I was a college student at the University of Utah and accepted a ride from a stranger and was attacked and assaulted by who turned out to be Ted Bundy. I never told anyone because I felt shame and embarrassment, and I thought my mom would make me drop out of school and go home, and a million reasons that made me think I'll just suck this up and go on with my life. And that's what I did for years and years. There was some bumps at the beginning, but eventually I put it away and had a normal kind of life, active in the community and active in my church, have children and pets, and was a pharmacist, had a wonderful career. And then something happened at work that triggered all this post-traumatic stress to start. After I thought I had put the whole thing away and handled it well, turned out I hadn't handled it at all.
Yeah. So, so many of us, talking to PTSD survivors, victims of assault, myself included, we don't have the tools. We just go on. I mean, we just, suck it up, buttercup. You don't talk about it. And so for you, did you share this with your family at all prior to writing the book? When did you share anybody that was close to you?
The first person I shared it with was, I refer to her in my book as my secret pal. And she was another Bundy victim from Florida that I just happened to by chance find on the internet, and we became internet buddies and emailed back and forth, and I shared little bits of it with her. And she encouraged me to find a counselor and start talking to a counselor. So that's what I did. But it kind of simultaneously I started writing, and mostly just journaling just for myself. And I thought, if I write it all down, I can understand it better, and that will make me feel better, and then I can burn the book and fire the therapist. And
there you
life will be good.
So one of the things that you talked about, because I don't want to give away everything in your book, because I'm telling you, once you start this book, you will not be able to put it down. One of the things that I've learned is that your faith is in the Mormon. People know it's a Mormon church, a Latter-day Saints. Has this strengthened your faith in God, in your belief, as a result of where you are today, looking back?
No, what's happened is it's changed my personal opinion of what God is in my life. When I was a child growing up in the LDS faith, I thought that Jesus was my best friend, and Jesus knew if I told a little lie, and he knew if I stole a cookie, and he wasn't ever angry. He was not an angry God. He was sad if I did something wrong, and I wanted to please him, and I wanted to include him in, I prayed to him all day long. I pray for things like, what dress should I wear to the first day of school, because that was important to me, and I thought it would be important to him as my best friend. And later growing up, I thought maybe my prayers would be, help me get a good grade on this test, or help me to know how to behave in certain situations. And I thought that I saw him as a personal God. And then after this happened, I sort of thought, there were a lot of things that kind of miraculously came together for me to be able to rescue myself that didn't happen for all of those other women. And I thought sometimes that maybe intervention from above helped me to escape, but I don't think so, because why me, and why not all those other women? And why would a kind and personal God let all of those women die those horrible kind of deaths? And so I still believe in God, and I still have faith, and I believe he's the creator. I haven't turned evolutionist,
Yeah.
but I don't see him as such a personal God. I think that he can look at the mountains and say, I love these mountains that I've created, and I love every tree on these mountains that I've created. They're all beautiful, and I love them all. But I don't know that he knows each and every tree and each and every pine needle on each and every tree. So I think that it's more generic God now.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I grew up in a religion too, and we're programmed to believe certain things, and the wrath of God. I grew up. I was fearful. My religion was to fear God. The wrath of God, like if you do anything wrong, or if you say a cuss word, you're going to go to hell and things like that. And I don't want the show geared around religion, but I think it's important that we talk about this topic too, because things happen in our life and it has us realign, why are we here? What is our purpose and their goal? So, I thank you for sharing that. The other question that I wanted to ask you about that day or going forward, did you have a gut feeling? Because Ted Bundy, for all accounts, for people who knew and saw pictures of him, he was a very good looking, likable man. Even Ann Rule worked with him, in a crisis center in Seattle. A lot of people don't know that. I mean, she worked side by side alone with him and was very personable. So that day, looking back, did you have a gut feeling?
I did not have a gut feeling. I believe in gut feelings, and I pay very close attention now.
Now, yeah.
Now, I think that I kind of believe that everybody does have that gut feeling or conscience or still small voice or whatever that kind of whispers in your ear. It never shouts at you, so you have to pay attention. But I've also learned that a lot of Ted Bundy's victims and everybody else's victims as well have had times when somebody just came in my door.
That's okay.
At times, lost my train of thought. Sorry.
That's okay. So your gut feeling today, you look at that differently. You do listen to your gut feeling then today.
Yeah, and the thing I was going to say was that Ted Bundy's victims, a lot of them had things that were going on in their life that were distractions that's keeping them from being able to listen to that still small voice. Some of them, one's father had just had a heart attack and she was worried about that, and two or three were studying for finals. One had just broken up with her boyfriend. I just had that dental surgery. And I think that we have to be especially careful when other unpleasant things are happening in our life, because we're sort of more vulnerable at that point.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point that you make, because when we do have distractions in our life, we need to check in. We need to check in and see what our feelings are. What would you say to the women that might be watching this now or later that have been hurt or victims in the past? Because that's one of the reasons that I know that you did write the book, is that you want to inspire other women. So what would you like to say to them that are watching this?
Well, first of all, it's never ever the victim's fault. There's a lot of victim blaming that goes on in the world, and it is never the victim's fault. It doesn't matter if you were out late at night or what you were wearing or if you were drinking. A sexual assault is never the victim's fault. And I would say if you've been hurt or injured and you're carrying these secrets around, find somebody to tell, whether it's a mother or a sister or a close friend or a clergyman or a therapist, just somebody to start getting it off your chest. Those emotions don't just heal themselves. You have to take them out and look at them and find a way to understand what has happened to you and why. And another thing I would like to kind of say is that if someone comes to you and has chosen you as their person to trust, and they're telling you this terrible thing happened to me, and I never told anybody because I was afraid they wouldn't believe me. First of all, believe them. These stories are, there's a very, very few people who make up this kind of story, but if somebody tells you this story, believe it. Most likely it is true. And second thing would be, don't be judgmental. Don't ask them what you were wearing or why were you there? Or didn't you know better than to get in that car with a stranger? Because those are judgmental things, and those are the very reasons that people don't come forward in the first place.
Well, and we see this so much on, social media has such a big presence now in our lives. And so when you see somebody that's on the news, especially somebody that's making an accusation against a politician or an actor or a singer, somebody famous, unless 10 people come forward and say that happened to me too, a lot of times they're shamed. They're not telling the truth. And I think we as women, we need to support them. And if it proves out that they were not telling the truth, then they've got to deal with that. They've got to deal with that. But we have to start supporting women coming forward and supporting them and knowing that we have their back. 2 years ago, on my show, I had Christine Davis on my podcast, and she was talking about, being molested as a child. And I didn't know it at the time, but it triggered me because she was talking about some of the signs to look for that may show up as being a victim, being traumatized. And she hit one of her topics. It struck me and it hit me, and all of a sudden it all came out that in 1975, I was raped in high school. And that's how it came out. And I didn't even tell my best friends, Rhonda, because I was ashamed. How did I get myself in this situation? Why did I agree to go with this girl I just met to a party and then be left there and let this stranger drive me home? He looked normal. He was a Ted Bundy, nice looking guy. Why didn't I know better? Why did I ride home when he went the wrong direction, saying, well, I got to tell my parent? He had the same stories and excuses. And I think that's why I got so emotional watching you on Dr. Phil and wanted to have you on my show, because if you and I can tell people that it's not our fault and we weren't wrong, then it's okay, that you and I have their backs.
Yeah, and that's true today, just as true as it was 40 years ago when this happened to me. Nothing much has changed. There's still women who are afraid, college students today who are afraid to report because they're the very same fears that you and I have had.
Yes.
That we won't be believed, or we'll be judged, or people will think differently about us.
Absolutely. One of the viewers would like to ask you a question. Are you open to taking questions?
I am. If I don't like it, I'll say no.
There you go. Charlene, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Would you ask your question to Rhonda?
Oh, I'll be happy to. Hello, Rhonda. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Charlene.
Hi. All right, so I had two questions. And the first is, I'm just wondering if today, now, you experience those sudden recall instances that before, I'm assuming, would have ruined the entire day, become an obsession to stand to that thought. But now, again, an assumption, if you have those sudden recall instances, do you have new coping skills that you've been able to deploy to handle them?
I do still. I don't have nearly as many as I did before, but I do have coping skills, and most of them have to do with remembering that it's not really happening. It's I'm right here in the moment. And one of them is really simple. I just look for different colors. I see there's a yellow rug, and there's a blue hand on that clock, and there's, I find things that are right here in this room, or when I was at work, I would reach out and touch my Pepsi can, because my Pepsi can would be cold. Even if it was empty, it would still be a cold metal can, and that would remind me that I'm not somewhere else. I'm right here.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
That's a great question. That's a great question. Susan, would you like to? I love what you wrote, Susan. If you would like to make a comment.
I just think for both of you, kudos to you for talking about it. I know I work with a lot of women, and I think you're both brave. I'm not happy to hear it, but I'm glad that it's getting out there. I'm going to buy your book. I want to read it, but I feel like people don't want to talk about this or mental illness. I had two daughters that went through university, so I'm not going to get into it, but people don't want to have ownership for these type of issues, and it's disgusting until something happens to them or their loved ones. So I just think we all do, as you say, Lisa, we need to let women know that we have their back, and we're not going to not believe them. We are going to take them seriously, and that this is completely wrong. Look how long it's taken for you guys. It's still very much front of your feelings right now. So I just think we need to do more. We need to be vocal. And thanks, Lisa, for this interview today. Like, for sharing. Can't wait to buy your book.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So how long, Rhonda, did it take you once you started writing the book, how long did it take you until you completed it? That was one of the questions somebody wanted me to ask you, because a lot of people have stories in them.
It took about a year to actually write it. And then it took about a year to get it published. And then it's been out about a year. So about 3 years ago that I started seriously writing it.
How did Ann Rule inspire you, and how did you connect with Ann Rule?
Well, I used to read whatever I could find about Ted Bundy, just because sometimes I was trying to find out if I was in the book somewhere, that maybe he'd mentioned me in an interview or something, but I read all of the things I could find about Ted Bundy. And of course, her book was like the Ted Bundy Bible.
Yeah.
And she was always kind of my hero, and she kind of told it like it was, and she pointed out the lives of the women before, and didn't just focus on the crimes and how gruesome they were, and things that a lot of the true crime books were aiming at that time. Now a lot of them are coming around to being more victim friendly and sharing the victim's point of view. And Anne was like that, and so she was always kind of my hero. When I was writing the book and I was deciding if I was really going to publish it or not, I kind of was discouraged, and I thought maybe, it's been a secret for 40 years, and publishing seems just to be a hard thing to get accomplished, and I don't want to force anybody to read my story, but maybe I'll just let it be a secret for another 40 years, and who cares. And then I thought about Ann Rule, and I thought if only one person on the entire planet was going to read my story, I would want that one person to be Anne. And so I managed to contact her through her daughter Leslie, and she did that wonderful blessing to me of putting the forward in my book.
It's absolutely beautiful what she wrote and what you wrote. How did you, the other question too was, how did you end up being on Dr. Phil? How did that come about?
My publisher kind of arranged that as a way of introducing the book. Thought it would kind of give it a big kickoff, and I don't really know the particulars of how they did it. I just know Dr. Phil's team called and interviewed me on the phone, and then they sent me airplane tickets, and I was worried about going to Los Angeles and being lost at the world's worst sense of direction. But when you get off the airplane, there was this little man with a sign that said Rhonda, and I thought, oh, that's so cool. I didn't have to worry about anything.
Yeah. And you were on there, what was it, last April of last year? And so for people that are watching this, you can go onto YouTube. Is it YouTube that they can find your show and then type in your name?
YouTube. Yep, type in Rhonda Stapley, and it'll bring up a bunch of, not just Dr. Phil, but other interviews that I've done too.
Wonderful, wonderful. So why today did you agree to come on this show and talk about your book?
Well, because I learned about you,
Yeah.
and I decided that this would be a good venue to talk to women who are interested in helping other women.
And are you glad you went on the Dr. Phil show? Are you glad that you did that? How did that feel afterwards? Like, how did you feel in your body afterwards?
I felt relief. It felt really good. And that's the other thing, I kept a secret so long because I was afraid it would be horrible to tell. And every time I've told it, it's nerve-wracking, and I'm totally out of my comfort zone while I'm doing the interviews, but it feels so much better afterwards. It's kind of like every time I go through it, it moves it a little ways farther away. It's not quite so in my face anymore.
Yeah. One of the things that we talked about before, when we were going to have you on the show, and I asked you on, because there's trolls, I call them trolls, that people that come on and they say negative things. So when you were on the Dr. Phil show, 98% were positive things, but you also had negative comments. Did those negative comments affect you?
They did. a little bit, but I was expecting them because my editor, of course, had warned me about that, and I was prepared. Of course, nobody likes to hear negative things.
Yeah.
And most of the negative things were saying she's a liar and that couldn't have happened. And
Yeah.
Ted Bundy never talked to his victims. And the first thing he would have done is smash her over the head. And that wasn't his mode of operation. And she has to be a liar. And she's chosen to do this now, all for the money. I don't know if people who write books probably know there's not a lot of money for most people.
No, there's not. And so I want people to know that are watching this, that if somebody has put down what you said, like, so for me, I was a very gangly high school girl, and this popular boy from another school, like, if I knew in my mind, if I would have told anybody, they wouldn't have believed me, because it's like, look at him and look at her. Like, he could get anyone. Why her? And I want to bring that up there because, so for people, if you're watching this and you've had somebody not believe you, don't let that stop you. Correct, Rhonda?
Correct. Just write them off as a troll.
And we have to keep it doesn't keep a sense of humor, but we have to realize in the big picture that we're not there anymore. And this is about empowering one another to not fear and hold back traumatic things that have happened to us. For people who have not sought counseling, and I did, I went to a therapist for my situation. What do you say to the people who have not talked to a therapist that have this story inside of them, or maybe they've shared it with a family member, maybe the family member said, keep it a secret, don't tell anybody, because people have been, molested too. So what would you like to say to them?
Well, some people have a bad feeling about therapists because they think it's a weakness. I need a therapist. You must be weak, or you must be mental, or something bad. There's a bad connotation about anybody who seeks any kind of official, professional kind of help, and that's phooey. If you smash your thumb with a hammer, you take it to the doctor and have him bandage it up and stitch it back together. Emotions are even stronger and more important to heal emotions, because those things don't heal by themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I just want to, before we wrap up, I want people to know that they can find your book on Amazon. Is there any other place that they can find your book?
It's also at Barnes & Noble, but it's not in every store, but they can order it for you.
Okay. And how are the sales doing? Does it kind of go high and low? A lot of people out there want to write books, and I tell people, if you're going to write the book, like you mentioned earlier, you're not going to be a millionaire by writing the book, but your story is very important. And as writing your book, has it helped you heal internally?
Writing the book was probably the most healing thing that I ever did. Of course, I used therapy along with it, but it was writing the book and then reading it back and then editing it and going over it and over it and over it and changing this word to a stronger word and deciding that I dared to tell a little bit more of this part or a little bit less of that part, and deciding if I was going to. Some of it I was really hesitant about publishing. Like, should I put in there the part about drug abuse because I abused drugs for a short period of time in my life? Or would all people who have known me in my professional pharmacy career go and just gasp? Should I leave that out, or should I tone it down? And I decided just it's a true story. Just let it be a true story. Yeah. And if people don't like it, this is my truth.
Yes, that is so important. And you did include that. And I don't want to give away the book, but one of the things that I loved about your writing is that you were very open. You were open about, everything. You went into such detail being open that I'm just like, wow. Because it isn't that it's shocking. It's just that it helped me understand being a victim myself and I had so many similar feelings. That's why I wanted you on the show, is that if I'm feeling this way from watching you, then I want to be able to reach other women who have been through something, traumatic in their lives. And it's different things. It's a different variety of things that happen. But we women, we have to come together and support one another. Is there anything else that you would like to say to the people watching the show?
Well, you know, that's just kind of along with what you just said is it's true that your situation is different than my situation, and everybody's traumas are different, and no one has experienced exactly what you experienced, and no one has experienced exactly what I've experienced, and yet we can share on an emotional level and have empathy for each other, and you're not alone, and I'm not alone, and neither are any of these other women.
No, it's not. And for the people that are going to learn, you know, when they read your book about Ted Bundy, I mean, he affected so many lives that we're never even going to know how many people he affected. But I even know a woman that got approached by Ted Bundy at Lake Sammamish back in the 70s. You know, that he had his cast on and needed help to get something to his car. And, you know, her and her friend said, you know, no, because he said, I just need one of you, and said no. So, I mean, he has affected so many lives that people don't even know about. And so I just really appreciate you coming on the show today and talking. I'm going to share a link for those of you watching that you can support Rhonda by purchasing her book, because it's very well written, and I don't want to give away any of the details, but it will change you, and it totally is from the heart. And so, Rhonda, thank you so much for coming today and being on my show. It's just you've just touched my heart like no one's business. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for having me.
Thank you. So everybody, thank you for joining us today, and we will be back next week. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.